I want to welcome everybody here tonight. I'm Congressman Jim McGovern, kind of the new guy around here, and I'm one of the sponsors of this event tonight, and I just wanted to welcome you all and thank you for coming out on this kind of rainy, lousy night. But I think the film you're going to see is really quite important, and so I think you'll realize it was worth making the trip. I want to thank the Opiate Education and Awareness Task Force for their work in making this evening possible, and for all the other work that they're doing. And in particular, I want to thank John Merrigan, who's here, and Chris Donlin and Dave Sullivan, who have been incredible activists on this issue and who have been working at the local, state, and federal level, making sure we're all doing what we need to do to combat this, this terrible scourge that we're faced with. I also want to thank President Bob Pura of GCC for hosting this event. I want to thank Judy Raper for helping put all this stuff together. But I want to emphasize the importance of GCC. You know, this school lives up to its name. It's a community college, and that means it is part of this community, and it cares about this community, and it gives back to the community. We had a conference here not too long ago on opiates and heroin addiction, and you know, it happened right here in the same room we're gathered here tonight. So many incredible discussions that lead to positive outcomes happen at this school, and so I hope that all of you appreciate this incredible treasure that we have in our community. I also want to thank Bess O'Brien, who directed the film tonight, The Hungry Heart. I want to welcome all the Vermonters who are here, who came south of the border to this weather in order to share their stories. And again, finally, I want to thank all of you for caring enough about this issue to be here tonight. Our ability to come together like this will help us fight addiction in this community and other communities across our country. We all want to get we all want to get right to the movie, but I also want to just draw your attention to the National Take Back Initiative happening later this month. As many of you know, opiate abuse often starts with the family medicine cabinet. And by throwing away unused medicine, we can decrease misuse and abuse. All the members of the Massachusetts delegation, including our two senators, joined with the mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, in announcing this take-back program. And we're all committed to kind of raising awareness all throughout the state. And I'll tell you, this is an important thing that most people don't realize. A lot of people go to the medicine cabinet. A lot of kids go to the medicine cabinet. Neighbors, friends go to the medicine cabinet. And that's oftentimes a gateway into heroin. And I told my mother, we got to clean your medicine cabinet. And I went to her medicine cabinet. She has medicine older than me. And she said to me, well, I don't want to get rid of that. I said, why not? She said, because I paid for it, you know? And I quickly kind of explained to her why it was important to get rid of it. I also told her that medicine that was as old as me is probably not good for you anymore. But nonetheless, we need to raise awareness on this issue because a lot of people don't think like that. I mean, my parents didn't think that. I didn't think that, quite frankly. I cleaned my medicine cabinet up just a couple of weeks ago. And so this Thursday at 2 o'clock, I'm going to be in Leominster, the Leominster City Hall, to take back unwanted prescription drugs. A similar event will be held at the Greenfield Police Department and other locations across the state on Saturday, April 26th from 10 to 2. I think you should spread the word. I think this is an important step in dealing with the issues we're going to be talking about tonight. So again, I want to thank you all for being here tonight, for including me in this community response, and it is now my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce the president of GCC, Bob Pura.
So when the congressman heard that this evening was going to be possible, he simply responded, how can I help? He stepped up. Our Stir All Club, the Student Senate, all said, we want to make this happen. So I too want to welcome you all on behalf of the students, the faculty, the staff. There are many people that made this evening happen, so I want to thank all of you. There really is no one cause of addiction to opiates, and there is no one successful treatment for all. There are as many individual journeys as there are individuals. But there are two things that all who are addicted have in common. Addiction to opiates is a disease and must be treated as such. Disease like heart disease, lupus, diabetes, all are treatable, but we look at them differently than the disease that brings us all here together as a community. Can you imagine telling a diabetic that their insulin was not available to them? Can you imagine the conversation on the street when a diabetic says, "I don't feel so good," and somebody says, "I have something that can help you"? Part of our work is to reframe how we look at this disease and then approach treatment from that perspective. We don't blame diabetics, but we still blame addicts. We don't treat addiction as we do heart disease. And number two, the addict is our neighbor, our friend, our family. They are our children. No one person has made that point clear and galvanized our local community support more than John Merrigan. His ability to pull that together was an extraordinary effort of great courage and commitment to community. But John didn't make that alone, and you heard our congressman talk about Chris Donnellan and David Sullivan. I want to add to that list an incredible resource for our community, a woman who grew up here in our community, who understands addiction from the 30,000 feet policy level, the impact of pharmaceuticals and the way in which big policy can be made, but also every single day works with her patients in our community in the treatment of the addicted and in the pursuit of quality public health in our community. So I want to just recognize Dr. Ruth Pote for being this incredible physician and resource here in our community. Thank you, Dr. One other quick thank you to the recorder and Chris Curtis. The effort to inform and educate the community has been robust. Everyone in this room understands what the governor of Vermont did on the evening of his State of the State address when he said in his entire address that we as a state have a problem. We in the state have something that we have to deal with. And he went on in great detail about the people and the lives that have been impacted by this addiction. Bess O'Brien made the film that tells that story and tells their story. Bess will join the conversation.
I want to thank Greenfield College. My God, what a totally wonderful, awesome place this is. I am so impressed. And I want to thank Judy Raper for helping to organize this whole event and all the community leaders that came together. All I want to say is that this film was made about 2.5 years ago. I started shooting this film up in Franklin County, Vermont, which is above Burlington, if any of you know Vermont. And I finished it about this time last year, and then we toured the film to 34 towns last fall in Vermont as part of a huge barnstorming tour. And that was where the governor heard about the film. He watched the movie and was extremely generous in using the film in his State of the State to talk about the many stories of people who were struggling with this issue, and in fact honored Fred Holmes, who is in the movie, and Dustin Macy, who is one of the leading characters in the film, and his mother, and was just very generous in supporting this film. So we are now starting to take the film beyond Vermont. I'm thrilled to be here in Greenfield. I would really, really encourage you to stay after. I know it's a long night, but I will be up here along with Raina Lowell, who's in the movie. She is one of the people you will meet in the film. She's 3 years clean now. She's extremely articulate and knows everything there is to know about opiate addiction and coming out the other side. So we'll have a chance to talk with you and have a conversation, so please stay. And that's it for now. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later. Thank you.
It will rip the closest family apart. And it's not just the addict alone that feels it. It's the grandparents, it's the aunts, the uncles, the mom, the dad, the siblings. It affects the whole family. And they become your addiction.
Percocets, hydrocodone, blue beans, pink beans, Dilaudid and Perc 30s and 80s and crack and cocaine.
December 1st will be 3 years.
Wow.
3 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Since the magic conversation?
Yeah. Since the day you, me, and my mother were in here.
And there were people who were worried that you don't want those kids in your waiting room. They don't look different, walk different, talk different. They're just like the others who are our children. It's just that the nature of their disease is difficult and more challenging.
When he got into the pills, that was his drug of choice.
Yes.
Was Oxycontin. I didn't dare to leave the house. I didn't know if he was coming home that night. I didn't know if he was going to jail that night. I didn't know if he was going to be dead in a ditch somewhere.
My name's Dustin Macy and I'm an addict. I just melted in my chair. It was the first time I've ever heard him say it. Now I can say that my son's an addict and I love him with all my heart.
As long as the shame is there, and as long as the ignorance is there, there is no way to break through that addiction.
Okay, thank you for staying. I guess we'll first start. My name is Bess. You probably remember me. I'm the director of the movie. And just going to introduce Raina. Raina, maybe you can say a few words.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here tonight. So I always tell audiences, because sometimes people have a hard time recognizing me from the film, but I was a brunette when I was interviewed a little over 2 years ago. So, and now I've got this weird yellow orangey thing happening, so I do look a little different. And when I was interviewed for the film, I was a little over a year sober. And on February 6th of this year, I celebrated 3 years of sobriety. Thank you. I say that every time, and every time I get choked up when I say it, so it's still an emotional thing for me. Absolutely the most important thing I've ever done. But tonight's really about you guys. We're here to answer questions or just hear some feedback. So don't be shy. We're pretty nice people.
Yes.
This is my first time, just you're not going to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, for those that couldn't hear, this young man was just telling us that he is in recovery for the first time from an addiction to opiates, and that he's on Suboxone and taking it as prescribed, but facing the same fear that Dustin and the rest of us face, when coming to the decision when to wean off, which is where I'm at as well. So I empathize with that, and I applaud you. And I would like to just say, because I do think it's important that it be said, some people do say it's a common saying in recovery that relapse is a part of recovery. I don't subscribe to that. I understand why people say it, but it doesn't have to be a part of recovery. The first time I heard that, that was permission for me to go back out and use, and that's just what I did. So it can also be a dangerous thing. So I applaud you, and we're pulling for you. Yeah.
Someone else?
What made you want to make the movie?
What made me want to make the movie? This film came to me from Fred Holmes, the doctor in the film. Fred had, as you saw in the movie, been the quintessential country doctor for about 30 years, literally made house calls. Almost everybody in Franklin County knows this guy. He's been to their house, he's, treated their children. And when Kyle came in to talk to him about 7 years ago, saying, I need help, I'm addicted, I don't know what to do, Fred didn't know what to do either, but he decided that he would take this issue on. And so we got a Suboxone license and started working very closely with the Howard Center, which is an outpatient organization right in St. Albans, right around the corner from him. And I think really fell in love with these kids and made it his mission to work with these young people. And as you saw in the film, continued to work as a pediatrician. And what I love about Fred is we spent about 8 months shooting this movie. We spent about 21 days with Fred in his office. And it was just so clear that it didn't matter if it was a little kid with an ear infection or Dustin, who was coming in at the age of 20 to speak with Fred and connect with Fred and get his Suboxone dose and leave. Fred always treated everybody with the same dignity, and he listened to everyone, and he had compassion for everyone. But anyway, Fred really felt that there was stigma around these kids that were coming to his office, and that there was a sense, even in the community, that people were like, well, it's those kids that you're treating, and it's the kids from that side of the track, and it's those bad kids. And he just felt that that was totally inappropriate. And so he was talking to a mutual friend of ours from the Department of Education, actually, about wanting to do some sort of project that raised the voices of young people in addiction and recovery. And he said, you should talk to Bess O'Brien. She's a documentary filmmaker. She makes these movies. So Fred called me up. I went to St. Albans. We had about 3 or 4 community meetings with Fred, his patients, other concerned community members. I showed them some of my other movies, and we decided that we would make a film. And then I also, so a lot of the film is on Fred and his practice, but then I also met people like Raina, Julie, who is the other woman in the film, because I wanted...
Say it best, one of the old people.
One of the old people, 30-year-olds, right? Everyone's young to me right now, but anyway, because I wanted to, I wanted to make sure that people didn't, pinhole this into, oh, well, it's only kids who are addicted, or it's only those people who are addicted. I wanted a real diversity. So it was important for me to have people of different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So some of the people in the movie weren't patients of Fred's. Raina wasn't a patient of Fred's, but she had an amazing story, and I wanted to include her. Something else?
Bess, Raina. Vermont's Governor Shumlin made your documentary a pivotal part of his State of the State address. 99.9% of it was about addiction. Can you talk a little bit about what's happened as a consequence of that event?
Sure, I'll start off, and then Raina can go. Yes, well, we toured this movie all across the state. I invited the governor we had 2 premieres. He wasn't able to come to either one of them. And then I invited him to all the other 32 screenings, and he never got to any of them. He knew about the film, kept saying that he was going to come, and finally somebody got the DVD and shoved it into his hands and said, you have to watch this movie. And so he sat down with his staff and watched the film, and I got a call a couple of days before New Year's saying that he had decided to focus his entire State of the State on opiate addiction, and that he was very moved by the stories of courageous people like Raina and Dustin and all these folks from Vermont, and that he wanted to reference the film, focus on the film, honor people from the film, and have us be part of the press conference afterwards. So we were all there at the State House when he did the State of the State. It was an incredibly momentous moment, I have to say. He was very brave to do it. It was a courageous thing to do himself. And the most important thing he did in that speech was to say that we need to look at this issue not as a criminal issue, but as a health issue. And that shifted the whole focus in Vermont to something different. Since then, his main objective has been to look at people who have committed petty crimes, and if they have addiction issues, to get them into treatment rather than putting them into the correctional system. in Vermont. So that is a huge shift. As we know, people going into corrections who have addiction problems, it does not help them at all. They just go in and out and in and out and in and out, and they don't get the help they need. So that's one of the initiatives that he's doing. Another one is he has put some more money into more treatment centers, and he has also given my organization, Kingdom County Productions, a grant to get the film into every single school in the state. So, and by the way, I have DVDs for sale up here. I also have information about our educational package, which is what we use when we go into schools. It has an incredible discussion guide. We've shown the film now in probably 10 schools already in Vermont, but it will be going next week to every single middle school and high school in the state. And so if you want to bring this to your high school, come talk to me afterwards. Raina, do you want to just talk a little bit about what we've learned by going into the schools?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, first I just want to say that I have heard many times people talking about Governor Shumlin's hidden agenda when making the decision to focus his State of the State address on addiction. As a recovering addict, I can't help but feel that those people that feel that way certainly have the luxury of feeling that way, and I do not. It really brought me to my knees, frankly. And the fact that people are talking about addiction in the way that we are is pretty amazing. And we're bringing a hidden issue, an issue that has been so saturated in shame for so long, out in the open, and we're talking about it, and we're helping rid ourselves of that shame, because I do believe that shame has absolutely no business, in the world of addiction. I'm not ashamed because I understand that though I have done many shameful things while in my active addiction, it is not a representation of who I am as a person. It does not reflect my character as a human being, and I want people to know that. That's part of the reason why I travel with Bess and the film. I've been to several of the school screenings, and it's been pretty amazing. I have to say, we've shown the film to kids as young as 12, I think, and there's a lot of fear surrounding bringing this film into schools. Many teachers and administrators are afraid that kids are going to watch this film and the only thing they're going to hear is that drugs make you feel good. I personally give kids a lot more credit than that, frankly. What we've been doing hasn't been working, and we need to change the conversation. The fact of the matter is that pharmaceuticals, like painkillers, one of the most dangerous aspects of it is that, they made me feel like a better version of myself. I felt like I had this protective bubble around me. I felt safe. It rid me of my anxiety and my depression and my fears. That's really scary stuff, and we need to be talking about that, because therein lies the danger of pharmaceuticals, which can be, they're accessible to kids in a way that other drugs are not. So, but yeah, these kids, they ask amazing questions, and they're really, really eager to connect. They're eager to connect with me. I'm a pretty honest person. I share my story in a very honest way, and they're really responding to that. And I have to say, I don't think we've left a school where, teachers and administrators have really, really just kind of been blown away. And their point of view before the film and after the film, are very different. So that's been amazing. And I have relationships with some of these kids that I've been maintaining that email me. And there have been kids that have come forward to talk about their own addictions, ask for help. And I'd like to, this doesn't have to do with the school, but I'd like to share the story really quickly, because I think it's one of the amazing things that has happened throughout this journey, and that's, Bess and I did an interview with MSNBC, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. And one of the journalists that that called me to do an interview before the MSNBC interview wrote a piece, in a pretty amazing piece. She was very interested in my story. We talked for about 2.5 hours. And 2 days later, I got an email from her telling me that she had an opiate addiction, that she'd been addicted for 5 years, and that she felt inspired by my story and by the film, and she was ready to get help. You know, this is a woman who graduated at the top of her class at Columbia School of Journalism. You know, and like me, you know, I think she felt like, you know, how could I let this happen to me? You know, I'm too smart for this. You know, none of us are immune, and I had to learn that the hard way. And so did she, but that was pretty amazing.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing and going around sharing the story. It's so clear to me that talking to middle schoolers and high schoolers is not soon enough. And hearing the doctor talk about the need for more early intervention programs and supports to young families is really significant. So many of Fred's youngsters were kids who got caught up in a system really early in their lives. Can you speak a little bit to other initiatives that are happening at younger levels or in support of families with young children so that they don't need the rehab programs, but that we can catch them and support them before that?
Well, I don't actually know all the programs that are out there, unfortunately. I'm just a lowly filmmaker. I think that prevention is huge, and it's a very big part of how we need to turn this around. I guess what I'll talk about, and then Raina can answer the question, but for me, I guess as a filmmaker, the name of the movie is The Hungry Heart, and to me that's really what it's all about, which is that as human beings, we all have hungry hearts. We all want to fill ourselves up. We all want to feel loved. We want to feel like we have a purpose in life. And I think life is hard. And I think as far as early intervention, I think we should be teaching little kids from a very early age that it's okay to feel bad and that you're going to go through some hard times and that that's okay. Everybody feels that way. That's part of being a human being, and that we need to teach kids from an earlier age coping skills so that when they get offered a drug, perhaps they have something else that can fill up that hole and not a drug. For I will say, you know, the lucky ones of us figure out ways to cope in our lives through whatever, through running, yoga, you know, going to work, taking a walk, listening to music, and the rest of us fill up ourselves with drugs because you take a drug and it makes you feel awesome and you feel great, and that's really hard to, once it makes you feel that way, it's really hard to stop. So I think that what we need to be doing is dealing with a culture that is telling us all the time that we're not good enough, we need immediate gratification, and we've got to feel better, 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 better. And I think we need to teach young people that that's not what life is about, and that it's okay, and that here are other ways of dealing with those hard times in your life that you're going to inevitably go through. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've had anxiety since I was a child, and you know, I didn't know that it was anxiety. I was in my late 20s when I figured that out, when I had my first anxiety attack. So, you know, I was a little girl having some pretty severe anxiety, and I thought, you know, that it was kind of my dirty little secret. I thought that it was, you know, this understanding I knew about myself that there was something wrong with me, because I could feel it, you know, there was something that wasn't right. And my job became covering that up and just hoping that nobody else was going to discover what I already knew about myself, which is that I'm not enough. You know, I'm not smart enough or funny enough or pretty enough or anything enough. You know, and nobody was talking about that. I had never heard anyone else describe feelings like that, so I really thought it was my issue and my problem. When I was in my late 20s, I lost a child, and I had my first anxiety attack. I was also immediately prescribed anti-anxiety meds and antidepressants. I mean, literally the next day. So, as though, okay, well, you're not going to want to feel these feelings because they're going to be real intense, and they were. And I definitely felt like I wasn't going to survive it. I became very angry over the next couple of years. And so when I took my first painkiller, you know, it took all of that away. I mean, it really did. It was like all of that buildup just dissolved, you know, in that moment when the opiates hit my bloodstream. And I felt like I'd found a solution to being in this world. You know, I really did. I was 30 years old. I felt like I knew about addiction. I felt like I understood addiction. You know, and I definitely felt, like I said before, like it couldn't happen and wouldn't happen to me. You know, what I didn't understand about addiction is the power of it. I didn't understand that it wasn't my choice when addiction was going to set in and carry me away. I didn't understand that I was going to lose the power of choice and that I was going to be driven by this addiction. I had heard that opiates take 3 days to detox from your system. So, you know, in my mind, I thought, well, I've been sick for 3 days before, so, you know, if things get bad, I'll just put the pills down, I'll be sick for 3 days, and then I'll be good to go. You know, I had no idea what it was doing to me. You know, and the first time that my drugs were taken away from me and I realized that I had lost all of my life skills, you know, I didn't know how to do anything anymore. I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to take care of my kids. I didn't know how to go grocery shopping. I mean, real simple stuff that I didn't know how to do anymore. So when I'd get out of rehab and I'd be faced with being a single mom and having to take care of a home, and I didn't know how to do any of it, you know? And I knew that if I went and got a pill and put it in my body like that, I was going to be okay. You know, and that was part of the struggle. It took a long time for me to get sober by the time I hit my bottom. And my bottom was pretty ugly. By the time I hit my bottom, I was an IV heroin user and a crack addict. I was living in my house in the middle of winter without heat with my 2 young kids. You know, I was burning furniture to stay warm, turning on the oven in the kitchen to stay warm. My kids were, you know, walking to school without socks in the middle of a Vermont winter. I was unfit to care for my kids. I would put them in my car and drive around with them high. It was ugly. But that's where my addiction led me.
And I would have to say that when we go to the schools, one of the most phenomenal things is we show the film, and Raina does a lot of the screenings with me, and she talks afterwards about her story, and we have like 10 to 20 kids who just stand in line wanting to talk to Raina, and what they will talk about is things like, Raina, I have anxiety too. These are little 12 and 13-year-olds. You know, and sometimes I think maybe I should take a pill. Or Raina, you know, my older brother I think is a drug addict and I don't know what to do. Or Raina, I get panic attacks and I feel really depressed and I feel this and I feel that. What should I do? How do I cope with that? And you know, it's so interesting because they're after this experience of seeing the film and hearing Raina, they're telling their stories, and the counselors from the school are all circling around these kids, none of whom have self-disclosed before. And they're taking their names down to follow up with them. So the fact that this is sort of going back to kids, I think kids need, as Raina said, they need to talk about this stuff. And they want to talk about this stuff. And they want help. And they want somebody to say, it's okay, let's work on those feelings. Let's figure out a way to help you with those feelings. Because that's what addiction is so much about, is filling the hole, whatever that hole is. It's not always the case, but a lot of the time, that's the issue.
Sorry. Thank you. I want to ask you a question. There are several school nurses in the audience today, and I think that we'd all like to know specifics on how we could get the film to our superintendents to get it shown. It's quite long. And do you folks come along with the film? So could you explain that, because we're in a position to do more outreach.
Yes. The film is long. It's no longer than any other film that a kid would go see if they went to the movies. So let's just put it that way, okay? And I understand that that's a challenge in schools, but
You'd be
if
amazed.
Fred was here, he would put he would bang his fist on the thing and say, these kids need to see the whole film. And, you know, the schools that have shown this film show the whole film, and yes, you have to stop school for 2 hours, and you have to show the movie for an hour and a half, and then, yes, we are available to come and have a Q&A afterwards. And you don't have to have us come. You can just show it and then do your own Q&A. I would say that bringing Raina or some of the other people from the movie is really powerful, because the kids have just seen their stories, and then many of them connect directly to them. You have to plan for it. You have to show it to other staff member, get them on board. But I think it's worth it. So anyway, the bottom line is, come talk to me, get my phone number, and you can book it.
One school, excuse me, I know had a variety of students from the school. You know, I don't know, maybe 10 kids from the school, maybe freshman through senior, I'm not sure, watched the film first with some of the faculty, and then they got feedback from the students to see if they thought that, you know, their peers should see the film, their reaction to it, and that, and I think that in the schools where there's some resistance, that often can really help. Because you'd be amazed. I mean, I'm telling you, 12-year-olds that sit there for 2 hours without squirming, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I really haven't. It's pretty amazing. And every time we do it, I think, oh God, this isn't gonna be good, you know. But they're riveted, you know, they really are. This is a part of our culture now. It's a big part of our culture, you know, and they're seeing it, they're experiencing it, they're feeling it, so.
The best quote I got from a kid is, a number of these schools, they have feedback, the kids the next day or and they send us the feedback, you know, what they thought of the movie. The best quote was, "This film was really powerful and it wasn't cheesy." To me, that's the best quote ever for a filmmaker. Yeah.
My name is Eric. This is loud. I am a member of the Recovery Project, the Recover Project here in Greenfield. I'm also a person in recovery for 25 years. And I'd like to say thank you, Raina, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. No one can tell the story of recovery like a person in recovery. And I wanted to thank you very much for making the film, and for Mr. Fred there for all his efforts. I basically spent the first half of the film silently sobbing. Almost couldn't take it on a personal level. Because those kids, a lot of the kids, especially a lot of kids who were younger when their parents divorced, didn't have a father, I totally identified with that. And the drug of choice right now is opiates.
Yeah.
And for me, it was marijuana and alcohol, cigarettes at 7 years old. You know, how you could not tell a 7-year-old kid was smoking cigarettes, I'd have a hard time figuring that out. But I think, you know, it's more of a, this is more of a symptom of our society, I'd like to say, that we really don't want to deal with the challenges. We all want the brand new cars. We all want the happy house and the big vacations and the new shoes and new clothes. We don't focus on the things that we really need, which is communication with our families.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I am longer in recovery and becoming a man, an older man at this point, I was a young man when I got into recovery. We still don't talk about it. I started thinking about my 16-year-old niece who I'm giving an electric guitar to for her 16th birthday. And I'm fearful of the places that rock and roll can take her. But you know, I don't want to sit in I want to bring this film to her. And I'd like her to see it. And I'd like my family to see it. Because if we don't start talking about it, we don't start putting it out in the light, it's going to continue to happen. This is not something that's new for Christmas sakes. It's been around my whole entire life. Addiction, opiate addiction, heroin addiction. I have a lot of young friends like Justin. I was sitting next to him. You know, it's amazing to me what these young men have in their life. They have a really hard time figuring out where they're going to live, what they're going to do. We need to address that. Recovering from addiction is important, but what do we do after they're sober? And this community of Greenfield, I'll just say, since we're in Greenfield, the Recover Project is a really great network I've been introduced to a bunch of people, and I'm working on some new things to help bring this out. And I just want to say it again, it's a great resource for anybody in the community looking to deal with people in recovery. Recover Project is a great asset to this community. And thank you so much for coming down tonight.
Thank
you.
That's great. Thank you. Recovery Project, is that what it's called? Yeah.
When I was looking at the film, it seemed to me that the film was as much about poverty as it was about addiction in many instances. And I have two people who are dealing with addiction and recovering, one not at that place yet. But being a single mom of 5 kids and being pretty much impoverished, what you're talking about, living by the oven to stay warm, that had nothing to do with addiction when my kids were small and I was bringing them up myself, but it probably did have a lot to do with their addiction, because how do you heal from that? So what I'm wondering is, with Washington taking away a lot of the survival money, even though there's the desire to deal with addiction, how do you get to a place where you can provide for families where the hurt is not there? And that was something that Fred was talking about too.
Well, yeah, I have to say I hear you, and I hear what you're saying, and addiction is everywhere in poverty, but it's everywhere else too. There is a reason, I think there are many reasons why we see it so much, and in instances that you're talking about, I think that it's harder for some people to hide when we're in poverty, when you don't have money to support your habit. I'm driven to steal, to lie and manipulate and do some pretty horrible things. If I had the money to pay for my drugs, I wouldn't be doing those things. The reason that my bottom looked the way it did was because all of the money that I was receiving and manipulating out of other people and stealing from other people was going to drugs, not to care for myself or my family. And I agree, absolutely, we all need support, and this is about education for everyone. And it is about facing life on life's terms. It is about learning how to stand up and walk through our fears. It's about learning that life can be really painful, and truthfully, it's the really painful experiences that we have that shape who we are, and it's amazing. I've amazed myself. Some of the things that I have been able to get through that I didn't think I would survive. I've been afraid of those intense and scary feelings, and we don't need to run from them. And this is just about education, and it's not about how much money your family is earning, where you're coming from. But yes, when you're faced with those hardships, yeah, we want to escape. We want out of that. We just want a break. We just want some relief. So I feel you on that level, absolutely. But again, this does not discriminate. And the reporter that I told you about earlier, happens to be worth about, I don't know, probably about $400 million. So, and she and I are exactly the same.
She comes from a very rich family.
Obviously.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think what Raina is saying is totally right on. I think, to get to your point, what we need, and I don't know what Massachusetts has for resources, but what you're really talking about is that we can't just be talking about addiction. We need to be talking about housing. We need to be talking about jobs. We need to be talking about enough resources, wraparound resources for people. We need to be talking about enough doctors who prescribe Suboxone so that people who want that tool can find it. We need to be talking about halfway houses, all those things that addicts need to help them when they get out of recovery. And frankly, a lot of those things we need to have in place for people who are poor to help them have a life, because when you don't have a life, then you get depressed, and when you get depressed, then it's easier to get addicted to something. I mean, Fred says it in the movie when he's talking about Kyle, the kid who's about to go back to jail. I mean, why should Kyle, who doesn't have a house, who doesn't have any money, who's under all this pressure to find a job, and who's going to hire somebody who's just out of jail and is on probation, why shouldn't he get depressed and use again? All of those things are triggers, okay? And everywhere we go, we talk to people who come out of recovery and go right back into their community, and there are not the services there for them, okay? And so they're just dumped back on the street, and they're bumping into their old friends who they used to use with. And I mean, how dumb do we have to be? I mean, of course they're going to start using again. So what communities like Greenfield need to do is they need to create really strong wraparound services so that when people do go get the help and they come back into the community, they have a sense of, some sense of a community that is helping them, and that they're not just alone, because that does not help in their recovery.
And that it kind of brings up, I just want to say, I don't know how much longer we have, but I don't want to, one more question. I don't want to leave tonight without mentioning this. I think it's really important, just that we acknowledge the loved ones of the addict. I know there's a lot of pain there and a lot of struggle. I know there's a lot of shame with loved ones as well, and there is also a lack of resources in that respect. And I appreciate that, and I just don't want that to go unacknowledged tonight.
Just a quick follow-up question. The relationships that Fred had with the patients seemed a huge part of the success of what happened after Fred retired. What's the follow-up there?
Well, Fred, I was extremely fortunate to be able to document his last year of practice. And of course, Fred, unlike I'm sure many doctors out there, was so welcoming and let me hang out in his office and shoot all of this material, which was unbelievable. But he retired, and then he took about 9 months to wean his patients either off of Suboxone, like Katie and Dustin, or he placed them in other care. In his community, there were like 5 or 6 other Suboxone doctors, so they did go to other doctors. However, just between you and me and a lamppost, a lot of those kids didn't make it because those doctors, you're absolutely right, one of the main reasons that people were getting better was because they had a relationship with Fred, a very special relationship with Fred. It wasn't really about going to get the Suboxone, it was about going and hanging out with Fred. So we need to Xerox about 100,000 Freds and scatter them all over the place. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Come and talk to us. Feel free to come up and say hello. Get a DVD if you want one. Thank you very much.